I've always loved the ocean. Growing up on the coast, it was my playground, my refuge. But last summer, that love turned into something else. Something darker. I've hesitated to share this story, but the nightmares won't stop, and I need to get it out. It was late July, and I had just wrapped up a grueling work project. My boss, seeing my exhaustion, suggested I take a few days off. I decided to spend the time sailing, a hobby that always helped me clear my mind. My boat, the Seafarer, was a modest but sturdy vessel that had seen me through many adventures. I set out early one morning, planning to sail to a small, uninhabited island about 50 miles offshore. The weather was perfect. Clear skies, a gentle breeze, and calm waters. As I sailed, the familiar rhythm of the waves and the salty air began to work their magic, and I felt my stress melt away. By late afternoon, I reached the island. I anchored the Seafarer in a small cove and took my dinghy ashore. The island was a paradise. White sandy beaches, lush vegetation, and no sign of human presence. I spent the evening exploring, collecting shells, and marveling at the vibrant colors of the sunset. As night fell, I set up a small campfire on the beach, cooked a simple meal, and settled in for the night. I woke up around midnight to a strange noise. It was a low, rhythmic thumping sound, like something heavy being dragged across the sand. My first thought was that it was some kind of large sea creature that had washed ashore, but when I looked around, I saw nothing. The beach was empty, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves. Shrugging it off as my imagination, I tried to go back to sleep, but the sound persisted, growing louder and more insistent. It seemed to be coming from the direction of my boat. Grabbing my flashlight, I decided to investigate. As I approached the water's edge, the noise stopped. I scanned the cove with my flashlight, but saw nothing unusual. The Seafarer was still anchored where I had left it, gently bobbing on the waves. Relieved, I turned to head back to my campfire when I saw it. A set of footprints in the sand. The footprints were large and deep, as if made by someone or something very heavy. They led from the water's edge up the beach, past my campfire, and into the dense underbrush. My heart pounded in my chest as I followed them, my flashlight beam trembling in my hand. The footprints led me to a small clearing, where they abruptly stopped. There was no sign of whatever had made them, and the underbrush was undisturbed. It was as if the creature had simply vanished. I stood there for a moment, trying to make sense of what I was seeing, when I heard it again. The thumping sound, louder and more insistent than before. This time, it was coming from the direction of the island's interior. I followed the sound, pushing my way through the dense vegetation. As I got closer, I noticed a strange, metallic smell in the air, like rusted iron. The thumping grew louder, almost deafening, and I began to feel a deep sense of dread. Finally, I reached a small clearing at the center of the island. In the middle of the clearing was a large, ancient stone well. The well was covered in strange, weathered carvings that looked like nothing I'd ever seen before. The thumping sound was coming from deep within the well. I approached the well, peering into its dark depths. The smell of rusted iron was overpowering now, and I could see a faint, reddish glow coming from deep within. I dropped a small rock into the well and listened. It seemed to fall forever before hitting the bottom with a sickening, wet thud. Suddenly, the thumping stopped, and an eerie silence fell over the clearing. I backed away from the well, a cold sweat dripping down my spine. As I turned to leave, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A pair of glowing red eyes staring up at me from the darkness of the well. I ran back to my camp as fast as I could, the underbrush tearing at my clothes and skin. When I reached the beach, I didn't stop. I jumped into my dinghy and rowed back to the Seafarer with all my might. Once on board, I pulled up the anchor and set sail, not caring in which direction, as long as it was away from that cursed island. I sailed through the night, the red eyes and the thumping sound haunting my every thought. When the sun finally rose, I found myself far from the island, the coastline barely visible on the horizon. I headed straight for home, not stopping until I reached the safety of my own harbor. I haven't been back to the island since, and I have no intention of ever returning. The seafarer sits idle at the dock, gathering dust and barnacles. I can't bring myself to sell it, but the thought of sailing again fills me with a deep sense of unease. I've tried to rationalize what happened that night. Maybe it was just my imagination, fueled by exhaustion and stress. But deep down, I know that what I saw and heard was real. The ocean, once my refuge, now holds a darkness that I can't ignore. So, to anyone reading this, be careful when you venture out into the unknown. The sea is vast and mysterious, and some things are better left undisturbed. And if you ever hear a strange thumping sound in the dead of night, turn back. Some secrets are meant to stay buried. I've been a marine biologist for over a decade, and in all my years of exploring the depths of the ocean, I've never encountered anything as terrifying as what I'm about to share. This isn't just a story. This is a warning. Last summer, my team and I embarked on an expedition to study a newly discovered deep-sea trench in the Pacific Ocean. The trench, unofficially named the Abyss Below, was deeper than the Mariana Trench, plunging over 12,000 meters into the Earth's crust. Our mission was to collect samples and gather data on the unique ecosystems thriving in such extreme conditions. We set sail on the Nautilus, a state-of-the-art research vessel equipped with cutting-edge technology, including an advanced submersible called the Deep Diver. This submersible could withstand the immense pressures of the deep ocean and was designed for extended underwater exploration. Our journey to the abyss below took 3 days. As we approached the trench, the mood aboard the Nautilus shifted from excitement to a tense, almost eerie anticipation. The sea around us seemed darker and more foreboding, as if we were venturing into a realm that wasn't meant for human eyes. On the first day of the dive, we lowered the deep diver into the water with myself, Dr. Harris, and our pilot, Lucas. The descent was smooth, and we marveled at the bizarre and beautiful creatures that inhabited the twilight zone. As we descended further, the water grew colder, and the light from the surface faded until we were enveloped in total darkness. We reached a depth of 10,000 meters when we noticed something peculiar. Our sonar detected a massive object lying on the seabed, far larger than any known submarine or shipwreck. Intrigued, we adjusted our course to investigate. As we approached the object, our lights illuminated a structure that defied explanation. It was a colossal, cylindrical tower, seemingly made of an otherworldly metal that shimmered with an eerie green hue. The tower was covered in strange, pulsating organic growths that looked like a cross between coral and flesh. The sight was both mesmerizing and horrifying. We decided to get closer, hoping to capture detailed images and samples. As we circled the tower, we noticed an opening at its base, large enough for the deep diver to enter. Against our better judgment, we decided to explore inside. The interior of the tower was even more unsettling. The walls were lined with intricate carvings depicting bizarre, nightmarish creatures and scenes of chaos and destruction. The organic growths we had seen outside were more prevalent here, pulsing and writhing as if alive. The air inside the submersible grew heavy, and a sense of dread settled over us. We navigated through a series of tunnels and chambers, each more alien and disturbing than the last. Finally, we reached a central chamber, where we discovered a massive, glowing orb suspended in the air. The orb emitted a low, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through our very bones. As we approached the orb, our instruments went haywire. The deep diver's lights flickered, and our communication with the Nautilus was cut off. Panic set in as we realized we were completely isolated, miles below the surface. Suddenly, the orb pulsed with a blinding light, and the organic growths around us sprang to life. Tendrils shot out, wrapping around the submersible and constricting it with incredible force. Lucas struggled to maintain control as the tendrils tightened, threatening to crush us. In a desperate bid for survival, Dr. Harris activated the submersible's emergency thrusters, propelling us backward and breaking free from the tendrils' grasp. We sped through the tunnels, narrowly avoiding more tendrils that lashed out at us. The hum from the orb grew louder, echoing through the tower like a monstrous heartbeat. We burst out of the tower and ascended as quickly as the submersible could manage. As we rose, I glanced back and saw the tower's organic growths extending outward, as if reaching for us. The sight sent a shiver down my spine. When we finally surfaced, the Nautilus crew was waiting anxiously. We recounted our harrowing experience, but our data and footage were corrupted by the electromagnetic interference from the orb. Only our word remained to testify to the horrors we had witnessed. Back on land, we reported our findings to the scientific community, but our claims were met with skepticism. The abyss below remains uncharted, its secrets buried beneath miles of dark, cold water. But I know what we saw, and I can't shake the feeling that the tower and its alien inhabitants are aware of our intrusion. So, to anyone considering exploring the depths of the ocean, remember this. Some places are meant to remain untouched, their mysteries left undiscovered. The ocean is vast and ancient, and there are things lurking in its depths that should never see the light of day. If you ever find yourself near the abyss below, turn back. For the sake of your sanity, and perhaps your very life, stay away from the forgotten depths. My name is Jack, and I've spent the better part of my life working as a commercial fisherman. The sea has always been a second home to me, a vast expanse of mystery and beauty. But there's one voyage that still haunts me to this day, a journey that made me question everything I thought I knew about the ocean. It was late September, and the fishing season was winding down. Our crew had decided to take one last trip before the winter storms set in. We set sail on the Isabella, a sturdy fishing trawler that had been with us through thick and thin. Our destination was an uncharted region known among sailors as the Whispering Waters, a place shrouded in folklore and eerie tales. The weather was perfect when we set off, clear skies and a gentle breeze. The first couple of days were uneventful. We cast our nets and hauled in a decent catch. On the third day, however, things began to change. The air grew colder, and a thick fog rolled in, obscuring our view of the horizon. The sea itself seemed to grow darker, the water taking on an almost inky blackness. That evening, as we sat down for dinner, we heard the first of the whispers. It was faint at first, like the sound of wind through the rigging, but it grew louder, more distinct. Voices, speaking in a language none of us could understand, seemed to echo across the water. We tried to dismiss it as the product of our imaginations, the result of fatigue and the oppressive atmosphere. But the whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing hour. By midnight, they had become an eerie chorus, surrounding the Isabella in a ghostly symphony. The crew grew restless, fear evident in their eyes. We tried to contact the mainland, but our radio was met with only static. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood on the deck, staring out into the fog-shrouded sea, trying to make sense of what was happening. It was then that I saw her, a figure, standing on the water's surface, barely visible through the mist. She was beautiful, with long, flowing hair that seemed to merge with the sea itself. Her eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and her voice, oh, her voice, was the source of the whispers. She sang a haunting melody that sent chills down my spine. I called out to the crew, but they were already under her spell. One by one, they walked to the edge of the deck, entranced by her song. I tried to stop them, but it was as if they couldn't hear me. They climbed over the railing and plunged into the dark water below, their faces serene, almost blissful. Desperate, I ran to the helm and tried to steer the Isabella away from the figure. But the ship wouldn't respond. It was as if an unseen force was holding us in place. The whispers grew louder, more urgent, and I felt an overwhelming compulsion to join my crewmates in the water. Just as I was about to give in, a sudden jolt shook the ship. The fog began to lift, and the whispers faded into silence. The figure on the water disappeared, and I found myself alone on the deck, gasping for breath. The next morning, I searched the water for any sign of my crew, but there was nothing. No bodies, no wreckage, nothing to indicate they had ever been there. The Isabella was adrift, and I had no choice but to navigate back to shore on my own. When I finally reached the mainland, I reported what had happened to the authorities. They conducted a search but found no evidence to support my story. The official report listed the crew as missing at sea, presumed dead. I've spent countless nights since then, trying to understand what I saw. I've researched every piece of folklore and legend related to the sea, looking for answers. Some speak of sirens, mythical creatures who lure sailors to their doom with their enchanting songs. Others mention spirits of the ocean, seeking revenge on those who trespass on their territory. Whatever the explanation, I know one thing for certain. The Whispering Waters are real, and they are not a place meant for human exploration. The sea is vast and ancient, and there are forces at work within its depths that we cannot comprehend. So, if you ever find yourself sailing in uncharted waters, and you hear a haunting melody carried on the wind, turn back. No matter how beautiful the song, resist the urge to follow it. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, and some waters are best left uncharted. I've been a deep-sea diver for over 20 years, and I've seen some strange things in my time. But nothing compares to what I experienced last summer off the coast of Bermuda. This is my story, and though it may sound unbelievable, I swear on my life it's true. I was part of a research team studying the Bermuda Triangle. Our goal was to explore the depths and gather data on the mysterious phenomena that have plagued the area for centuries. We had the best equipment available: state-of-the-art submersibles, advanced sonar, and a crew of experienced divers and scientists. Our base of operations was a research vessel called the Abyss Explorer. It was equipped with everything we needed to conduct our dives and analyze our findings. We had been at sea for about a week when we received a strange sonar reading from the ocean floor. It was unlike anything we had seen before, an enormous void deeper than any known trench. Naturally, we were intrigued. We decided to send down one of our submersibles, the Deep Seeker, to investigate. I was chosen to pilot the sub, along with Dr. Evelyn Ross, a marine biologist, and Captain James Cole, an experienced deep-sea navigator. We descended into the void, our instruments recording every detail. As we went deeper, the water grew colder, and the light from the surface disappeared entirely. The only illumination came from the submersible's lights, casting eerie shadows in the inky blackness. At around 9,000 meters, we began to pick up strange readings. The sonar was detecting large, moving objects around us, but we couldn't see anything. Our lights weren't powerful enough to penetrate the darkness, and the objects remained elusive. Suddenly, the submersible systems started malfunctioning. Lights flickered, instruments went haywire, and the sonar emitted a high-pitched screeching sound. We tried to contact the Abyss Explorer, but our communications were filled with static. Then, just as suddenly as it started, everything went silent. We found ourselves in total darkness, the submersible drifting aimlessly. Panic set in as we struggled to regain control. Then, out of the darkness, a voice spoke. It was a deep, resonant echo, speaking in a language none of us understood. It seemed to reverberate through the hull of the sub, chilling us to the bone. Dr. Ross was the first to break the silence. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Captain Cole nodded, his face pale. "What the hell is going on?" he muttered. Before we could answer, the submersible's lights flickered back on, revealing a massive, bioluminescent structure in front of us. It was an enormous, alien-looking city, glowing with an otherworldly light. Towers and spires rose from the ocean floor, connected by bridges and walkways that seemed to pulse with energy. We were awestruck. This was a discovery beyond our wildest dreams, an ancient underwater city hidden in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle. But as we approached, the voice returned, louder and more insistent. It was a warning, a command to leave. Ignoring the warning, we pressed on, eager to explore the city. We navigated through the alien streets, capturing footage and samples. But the deeper we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The voice grew louder, more desperate, and the city's bioluminescence began to flicker. We reached the heart of the city, a massive, pulsating orb that seemed to be the source of the light and the voice. As we approached, the orb emitted a blinding flash, and the submersible was rocked by a powerful force. Our instruments went haywire again, and the voice reached a deafening crescendo. Then, everything went dark. When I awoke, I was back on the Abyss Explorer. The crew was frantic, and the submersible was nowhere to be seen. They told me we had been missing for over 24 hours, with no trace on the sonar or communication systems. Dr. Ross and Captain Cole were never found. The footage and data we collected were corrupted, and the alien city remained a mystery. The official report labeled the incident as an equipment malfunction and an unexplained disappearance. But I know what I saw. The abyssal city, the voice, the warning. It was real. And whatever it was, it didn't want us there. I've since left deep-sea diving, the experience leaving me with nightmares and a lingering sense of dread. The ocean is vast and full of mysteries, but some things are meant to remain hidden. The Bermuda Triangle holds secrets that defy explanation, and I urge anyone considering exploring its depths to think twice. If you ever find yourself in the Bermuda Triangle, and you hear a voice echoing through the water, heed its warning. Turn back. Some mysteries are best left undisturbed. I've spent most of my life working in marine research, fascinated by the mysteries of the deep ocean. But after what happened last summer, I'll never set foot on a boat again. This isn't just a story. It's a recounting of the most terrifying experience of my life. Our research team had been granted a significant government grant to explore a newly discovered trench in the Atlantic Ocean, south of the Azores. This trench, dubbed the Desolation Abyss, was deeper than any known trench, with initial sonar readings suggesting depths of over 15,000 meters. We were eager to uncover its secrets, but we had no idea what we were getting into. Our vessel, the Ocean Voyager, was equipped with the latest technology. An advanced submersible called the Nautilus designed for extreme depths, high-resolution sonar, and a dedicated communication link with a satellite network. Our team comprised myself, Dr. Amelia Carter, a marine biologist, Dr. Mark Reynolds, an oceanographer, and Captain Henry Walters, an experienced deep-sea navigator. We arrived at the site after 3 days of sailing. The weather was clear, and the sea was unusually calm. We spent the first day conducting surface scans and deploying unmanned probes to gather preliminary data. The readings were astonishing. The trench seemed to extend far deeper than we had anticipated, and there were signs of geothermal activity and unique bioluminescent organisms. On the second day, we prepared for our first manned descent. The Nautilus was lowered into the water with myself, Dr. Reynolds, and Captain Walters on board. The descent was smooth, the submersible's lights piercing the darkness as we descended deeper and deeper. At around 10,000 meters, we began to notice peculiar formations on the sonar. Large, unnatural structures that resembled ruins. We decided to investigate further, steering the Nautilus towards the source of the readings. As we approached, our lights revealed an underwater city, partially buried in sediment and covered in strange, luminescent algae. The architecture was unlike anything we'd ever seen, with towering spires and intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dark water. We were both awestruck and uneasy. This was a discovery of immense significance, but there was something unsettling about the city. It felt ancient and foreboding, as if it had been abandoned for millennia. We navigated through the ruins, capturing footage and samples, and our instruments recorded a steady increase in temperature and electromagnetic activity. Suddenly, the submersible's lights flickered, and our instruments went haywire. The radio emitted a burst of static, followed by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to vibrate through the hull of the Nautilus. We tried to contact the Ocean Voyager, but our communications were filled with an eerie, rhythmic noise. Before we could react, the ground beneath us began to shake. The city seemed to come alive, the bioluminescent algae pulsing in unison with the hum. We looked out the viewport and saw massive shadows moving through the ruins, too large and too fast to be any known marine life. The water grew colder, and the hum turned into a low, guttural growl. Captain Walters tried to steer the submersible away, but the controls were unresponsive. We were trapped, drifting aimlessly through the alien city. As the shadows drew closer, we saw them more clearly. Enormous, grotesque creatures with elongated bodies, multiple eyes, and tentacles that writhed like living nightmares. They moved with an otherworldly grace, their eyes glowing with an unsettling intelligence. Dr. Reynolds was the first to panic, shouting incoherently as he struggled to regain control of the submersible. I tried to calm him down, but my own fear was overwhelming. The creatures circled us, their eyes fixed on the Nautilus, and the growl grew louder, more insistent. Without warning, one of the creatures lunged at us, its tentacles wrapping around the submersible with a force that made the hull groan. The lights flickered again, and the interior of the Nautilus was bathed in a sickly green glow. The creature's eyes were inches from the viewport, and I felt an overwhelming sense of dread as it stared into my soul. Then, as quickly as it had attacked, the creature released us. The growl subsided, and the shadows retreated into the ruins. The submersible systems slowly came back online, and we regained control. Captain Walters didn't waste a second, steering us away from the city and towards the surface. The ascent was agonizingly slow. The eerie hum persisted, though fainter, and we kept a watchful eye on the sonar, fearing the creatures would return. When we finally breached the surface, we were met with frantic voices from the Ocean Voyager. They had lost contact with us for nearly 2 hours and had feared the worst. We were pulled back on board, shaken and exhausted. We reviewed the footage and data, but much of it was corrupted by the electromagnetic interference. What little we had was enough to confirm the existence of the underwater city and the terrifying creatures that inhabited it. Back on land, we reported our findings to the authorities, but our story was met with skepticism and disbelief. The official report cited equipment malfunction and hallucinations due to deep-sea pressure. The desolation abyss was declared off-limits, and our grant was revoked. I've spent the past year trying to make sense of what happened. I've researched every legend and myth about the ocean, searching for answers. Some speak of ancient, otherworldly beings that dwell in the deep, guarding their secrets with a vengeance. Others mention lost civilizations swallowed by the sea, their inhabitants transformed into monstrous guardians. Whatever the truth, I know one thing for certain. The desolation abyss is not a place for human exploration. The ocean is vast and ancient, and there are things lurking in its depths that defy explanation. If you ever find yourself near the abyss, heed my warning. Turn back and never look back. The sea holds many secrets, and some are meant to remain buried. I've been a marine historian and diver for over 15 years, but what I experienced last winter during an expedition off the coast of Newfoundland has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the ocean. This is my story, and I hope it serves as a warning to anyone daring to venture into the unknown. The expedition was funded by a private collector who was obsessed with finding the remnants of a legendary lost fleet from the early 1700s. According to old sailor tales, this fleet was part of a secret expedition sent by the British Crown to locate a mythical island said to be rich with unimaginable treasures. The fleet vanished without a trace, and no records of its fate ever surfaced. Our vessel, the Endeavour, was equipped with the latest in underwater archaeology technology. We had high-resolution sonar, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and a team of seasoned divers. The search area was vast, stretching hundreds of miles across some of the most treacherous waters in the North Atlantic. For days, we found nothing but vast expanses of ocean floor. The morale on the Endeavour was sinking as fast as our hopes. Then, on the 6th day, our sonar picked up something unusual. At first, it looked like a series of underwater mountains, but as we adjusted the sonar's resolution, the shapes became clearer. They were not mountains. They were ships. We had found the lost fleet. Excitement surged through the crew as we prepared the ROVs to explore the wreckage. As the ROV descended into the icy depths, the first images of the ships came into view. They were remarkably well preserved, sitting upright on the ocean floor as if they had been placed there. The ships were covered in a thick layer of silt and algae, but their structures were intact. We deployed the ROV to take samples and gather footage. The deeper it went, the stranger things became. Among the wreckage were artifacts that didn't belong to any known civilization. Intricately carved statues, strange metal objects, and large, crystal-like structures that emitted a faint glow. One of the most puzzling discoveries was a large, ornate door embedded in the seafloor, completely intact and covered in indecipherable inscriptions. It seemed to be made of a metal that our instruments couldn't identify. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a dark passageway leading into the depths. We decided to investigate further, sending the ROV into the passageway. The video feed showed walls covered in the same strange inscriptions, glowing faintly as the ROV passed. Suddenly, the video feed cut out, and the ROV stopped responding. We were left with a difficult decision: leave the ROV or send a dive team to retrieve it. Driven by curiosity and a sense of duty, we opted for the latter. I volunteered to lead the dive along with 2 other experienced divers, Sarah and Tom. The descent into the depths was harrowing. The water was pitch black, and the cold seeped through our suits. As we approached the passageway, the faint glow of the inscriptions illuminated our path. Entering the passage, we felt an inexplicable pressure, as if the water itself was pushing us back. We found the ROV about 50 meters in, entangled in what appeared to be organic material, long, thread-like tendrils that seemed to pulse with life. As we freed the ROV, Sarah pointed her light down the passageway and froze. I turned to see what had startled her and saw a figure standing in the distance. It was humanoid but clearly not human. Its body was elongated, with limbs that were too long and thin. Its eyes glowed with a pale blue light, and it moved with an eerie grace. We stared at it in stunned silence as it began to move towards us. Fear gripped us as we backed away, but the passageway seemed to extend infinitely. The figure moved faster, and we realized it wasn't alone. More figures emerged from the darkness, their eyes glowing and their movements synchronized. Panic set in and we turned to flee. As we swam back through the passage, the figures pursued us with increasing speed. We emerged into the open water, and the pressure lifted, but the figures followed us, undeterred by the change in environment. We made it back to the Endeavor, breathless and terrified. The crew pulled us aboard, and we scrambled to explain what we had seen. The figures stopped at the edge of the ship's lights, their glowing eyes watching us from the darkness. We reviewed the footage from the ROV and our dive cameras. The images were grainy, but the figures were clearly visible, their glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. The ornate door and the strange passageway were unlike anything we had ever seen. The decision was made to leave immediately. As we sailed away from the wreckage, the figures disappeared into the depths. We reported our findings to the authorities, but our story was met with skepticism and disbelief. The private collector who funded the expedition dismissed our claims as hallucinations caused by deep-sea pressure. But we know what we saw. The lost fleet, the strange artifacts, and the eerie figures were real. The ocean is vast and full of mysteries, and some things are better left undisturbed. The Desolation Abyss holds secrets that defy explanation, and the Lost Fleet is just one of its many mysteries. If you ever find yourself exploring the depths of the North Atlantic, heed this warning. There are things in the deep that are meant to remain hidden. The ocean is a place of wonder and beauty, but it is also a place of darkness and terror. Respect it and never venture too far into the unknown. I've been a marine biologist for over 20 years, but nothing in my career prepared me for what I experienced last autumn. Our expedition off the coast of Greenland was supposed to be a routine exploration, but it turned into a nightmare that still haunts me to this day. We were studying the effects of climate change on marine ecosystems, focusing on the rapidly melting glaciers and their impact on ocean currents. Our vessel, the Arctic Dawn, was equipped with advanced research equipment and a dedicated crew of scientists and divers. The team included myself, Dr. Karen Hastings, a marine ecologist, Dr. Michael Foster, a glaciologist, and Captain Jonathan Blake, a seasoned navigator. The first few days were uneventful. We collected water samples, recorded data on marine life, and documented the retreating ice shelves. On the fourth day, however, we noticed something unusual on the sonar. A large, deep crevasse had opened up beneath the ice, stretching miles into the ocean floor. Intrigued by this discovery, we decided to investigate further. We deployed an ROV, remotely operated vehicle, to explore the crevasse. The descent was slow, the light from the surface quickly fading into darkness. As the ROV descended, the camera feed revealed a vast underwater cavern. The walls were covered in strange, luminescent organisms that pulsed with an eerie blue light. The deeper we went, the more bizarre the environment became. The water temperature dropped sharply, and the ROV's sensors picked up unusual readings. Metallic structures, like ancient ruins, began to appear on the screen. They were covered in a thick layer of silt and ice, but their shapes were unmistakable: columns, arches, and intricate carvings. Excitement turned to unease as we realized the implications of our discovery. This was evidence of a lost civilization, preserved beneath the ice for millennia. The structures were unlike anything we had ever seen, suggesting an advanced culture that predated known history. we decided to dive down and explore the ruins in person. I led the dive, along with Dr. Hastings and Dr. Foster. As we descended into the crevasse, the cold was almost unbearable. Our dive lights illuminated the strange, alien landscape, casting long shadows on the ancient structures. We landed near what appeared to be a large temple. The entrance was marked by massive stone pillars, inscribed with symbols that seemed to glow faintly. As we approached, the ground beneath us trembled, and a low, resonant hum filled the water. Dr. Hastings suggested we enter the temple to escape the cold. Reluctantly, we agreed and made our way inside. The interior was vast, with high ceilings and walls covered in the same glowing inscriptions. At the far end of the chamber, a large stone altar stood, surrounded by strange artifacts and carvings. As we explored, the hum grew louder, resonating through the structure. Dr. Foster pointed to a large, circular stone set into the floor. It was covered in the same symbols, and at its center was a dark, glassy orb that seemed to absorb light. Curiosity got the better of us. Dr. Hastings reached out and touched the orb. Immediately, the hum intensified, and the temperature plummeted. The walls of the temple began to pulse with light, and a deep, resonant voice echoed through the chamber, speaking in a language none of us understood. Panic set in as the floor beneath the orb began to crack, and a swirling vortex of water and light emerged. The voice grew louder, more insistent, as if it were commanding us. We turned to flee, but the entrance had sealed shut, trapping us inside. Desperation took over as we searched for another way out. The vortex grew larger, and the temperature continued to drop. Our dive suits provided little protection against the bone-chilling cold. Suddenly, Dr. Foster screamed as a tendril of light emerged from the vortex and wrapped around his leg, pulling him towards the center. We tried to pull him back, but the tendril was too strong. Dr. Hastings and I watched in horror as he was dragged into the vortex, his screams echoing through the chamber before being abruptly silenced. The voice continued to chant, growing louder and more frenzied. In a last-ditch effort, I grabbed one of the artifacts from the altar and hurled it at the orb. The impact shattered the glassy surface, and the vortex began to collapse. The temple shook violently, and the walls started to crack and crumble. The entrance burst open, and we swam for our lives, barely escaping as the temple collapsed behind us. We ascended as quickly as we could, the cold and pressure weighing heavily on us. When we finally broke the surface, we were pulled aboard the Arctic Dawn, gasping for breath and shaking with fear. We reported what had happened, but our story was met with skepticism. The data from our dive was corrupted, and the sonar readings were dismissed as anomalies. Dr. Foster was declared missing, presumed dead, and the expedition was called off. I've spent countless hours researching ancient myths and legends, trying to make sense of what we experienced. Some speak of ancient gods and forgotten civilizations buried beneath the ice, guarding their secrets with powerful magic. Others tell of portals to other realms, hidden deep within the earth. Whatever the truth, I know one thing for certain. The ocean is full of mysteries that we are not meant to uncover. The ruins beneath the ice are a testament to a lost world, and the forces that guard them are beyond our understanding. If you ever find yourself exploring the depths of the Arctic, heed my warning. Respect the unknown, and never venture too far into the darkness. Some secrets are meant to remain hidden, and the ocean is a place of wonder and terror. I've been a commercial diver for almost 20 years, and I've seen my fair share of strange things beneath the waves. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened during a salvage operation off the coast of Bermuda last summer. This story isn't just a warning. It's a testament to the terrifying mysteries of the deep ocean. We were hired by a private salvage company to recover a sunken freighter, the SS Ocean Star, which had mysteriously gone down in the Bermuda Triangle back in the 1970s. The ship was rumored to be carrying a valuable cargo, and our job was to locate it, assess the condition, and recover whatever we could. Our team, consisting of myself, Jack, the lead diver, Emily, the marine biologist, and Captain Sam, was aboard the Deep Explorer, a state-of-the-art salvage vessel. We had all the necessary equipment: advanced sonar, remotely operated vehicles, ROVs, and diving gear capable of handling the pressures at the freighter's depth. On the first day, our sonar picked up the wreck's location. It lay at the bottom of a deep trench almost 800 feet down. The ship appeared intact, which was unusual given its long submersion. Excitement and curiosity filled the crew as we prepared for the dive. I was the first to descend. The water grew darker and colder the deeper I went, the sunlight fading to an inky black. My dive light cut through the darkness, revealing the ghostly outline of the SS Ocean Star resting on the seabed. It was eerily beautiful, encrusted with decades of marine growth. As I approached, I noticed something strange. The ship seemed to be surrounded by a faint, ethereal glow. My radio crackled to life, and Jack's voice came through. "Everything okay down there, Matt?" "Yeah," I replied, "but there's something odd. The ship is glowing." "Probably bioluminescent algae," Emily suggested. "Get a sample if you can." I moved closer, reaching out to scrape a bit of the glowing substance into a sample jar. As I did, a chill ran down my spine. The glow seemed to pulse, almost like it was alive. I shook off the feeling and continued my survey of the wreck. The ship's hull was remarkably intact, but the cargo holds were sealed tight. I relayed my findings to the surface, and we decided to use the ROV to get a closer look before attempting to open the holds. As the ROV descended, its camera feed displayed on the monitors aboard the Deep Explorer. We watched in silence as it navigated around the wreck. Suddenly, the feed flickered, and the ROV's lights dimmed. Captain Sam cursed under his breath, trying to re-establish control. The lights came back on, revealing something that made my blood run cold. A figure standing on the deck of the freighter, illuminated by the ROV's lights. It was a woman, her skin pale and eyes glowing with the same ethereal light that surrounded the ship. She wore an old-fashioned dress, her hair floating around her head like a dark halo. She stared directly into the camera, her expression unreadable. "What the hell is that?" Jack whispered, his voice barely audible. Emily leaned closer to the screen, her face pale. "It looks like a ghost." Before we could react, the feed cut out completely, and the ROV went offline. Panic set in as we tried to regain control, but it was no use. The ROV was gone. We debated our next move, but curiosity and the promise of valuable cargo drove us to continue. Jack and I suited up for another dive, determined to find out what was happening. As we descended, the water grew colder, and the sense of unease grew stronger. We reached the freighter and made our way to the deck. The glow was stronger now, pulsing rhythmically. I felt drawn to it, compelled to move closer. Jack called out to me, but his voice seemed distant, like it was coming from another world. I reached the spot where we had seen the figure, but there was no sign of her. The glow intensified, and a soft, melodic sound filled the water. It was beautiful, hypnotic, like a siren's call. I felt myself moving toward the source, unable to resist. Jack grabbed my arm, snapping me out of the trance. "What the hell are you doing, Matt? Snap out of it." I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. I don't know. It's like I couldn't control myself." We decided to investigate the cargo holds, hoping to find some answers. Using a hydraulic cutter, we managed to open one of the sealed hatches. Inside, we found crates filled with strange artifacts, ancient relics and mysterious objects that didn't belong on a freighter. As we examined the contents, the melodic sound grew louder, and the glow became blinding. The water around us began to swirl, and the temperature dropped sharply. We turned to see the figure from the ROV feed standing in the doorway, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered, her voice echoing in our minds. "Leave this place, or you will never return." Fear gripped us as the water around us seemed to come alive, swirling and churning with unseen forces. We scrambled to get back to the surface, the figure's warning echoing in our ears. We barely made it back to the deep explorer, our hearts pounding and breaths coming in ragged gasps. We recounted our experience to the rest of the crew, but they were skeptical. The artifacts we had recovered were examined, but their origins remained a mystery. Captain Sam decided to call off the operation. The risk was too great, and the haunting presence of the figure was too terrifying to ignore. We left the site and reported our findings to the authorities, but our story was met with skepticism and disbelief. To this day, I can't explain what we encountered in the depths of the Bermuda Triangle. The glowing woman, the hypnotic song, and the ancient artifacts remain a mystery. But I know one thing for certain. The ocean is full of secrets and dangers that we are not meant to uncover. If you ever find yourself diving in the depths of the ocean, remember this tale. Respect the unknown, and beware the siren's call. The sea is a place of wonder and beauty, but it is also home to ancient terrors that defy explanation. Heed this warning, and never venture too far into the abyss. I've spent the last 15 years as a deep-sea diver and underwater archaeologist. I've seen my share of strange and unexplainable phenomena, but nothing could have prepared me for what I experienced last fall while on an expedition off the coast of the Azores. If you're thinking about diving in unexplored waters, heed this story as a stark warning. Our mission was straightforward: to locate and document the wreckage of an old World War II naval convoy rumored to have sunk during a fierce storm. The convoy, known as the Phantom Fleet, was said to have been carrying valuable military cargo. The historical records were vague, but they suggested that the ships had gone down in one of the deepest parts of the Atlantic. We set out aboard the Ocean Voyager, a research vessel equipped with cutting-edge technology, including a state-of-the-art submersible, the Nautilus. Our team included myself, Dr. Elena Ramirez, a marine historian, Captain Robert Hale, an experienced diver and navigator, and Dr. Marcus Lang, an oceanographer. After a week of searching, our sonar finally picked up signs of the wreckage. The readings indicated a cluster of ships lying at a depth of about 3,000 meters. The sonar images were faint and distorted, almost as if the wreckage was shrouded in some kind of interference. Excitement and anticipation filled the air as we prepared the Nautilus for its descent. Captain Hale, Dr. Ramirez, and I were to make the initial dive. As we descended into the abyss, the water grew darker and colder, the sunlight vanishing into the depths. Our dive lights pierced the inky blackness, revealing the ghostly outline of the first ship. It was an eerie sight. The vessel was remarkably well preserved, almost as if it had been frozen in time. The hull was intact, and the deck was littered with crates and equipment. As we moved closer, we noticed something even more unsettling. The ship was surrounded by a faint, ethereal glow. Dr. Ramirez theorized that the glow was caused by bioluminescent organisms, but there was something unnatural about it. The light seemed to pulse rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. We continued our exploration, documenting everything we saw. The deeper we went, the more ships we found. It was a veritable graveyard of vessels, each one in a state of remarkable preservation. Some were military transports, others were supply ships, and a few were clearly civilian vessels that had somehow gotten caught in the convoy's ill-fated journey. As we explored the wreckage, the interference on our instruments grew worse. Communications with the surface became sporadic, and our sonar readings were distorted. It was as if the entire area was enveloped in some kind of electromagnetic field. We decided to enter one of the larger ships, a military transport named the USS Harbinger. The interior was dark and silent, the corridors filled with the detritus of a bygone era. We made our way to the cargo hold, hoping to find clues about the convoy's mission. Inside the hold, we found rows of crates marked with military insignia. We pried one open, revealing a cache of weapons and munitions. But it wasn't the contents of the crates that caught our attention. It was the strange, crystalline growths covering the walls and floor. The crystals pulsed with the same eerie glow that surrounded the ships. Dr. Ramirez took a sample for analysis, but as she did, the glow intensified, and a low, resonant hum filled the air. It was a sound that seemed to penetrate our very bones. Captain Hale's voice crackled over the radio, filled with static. "We need to get out of here. Something's not right." We started to make our way back to the submersible, but the ship seemed to come alive around us. The walls vibrated, and the hum grew louder, almost deafening. Shadows danced in the corners of our vision, and we felt a presence, something watching us. We reached the Nautilus and secured ourselves inside. As we prepared to ascend, the submersible's lights flickered, and the instruments went haywire. The hum was now a roar, and the glow outside was blinding. Captain Hale tried to initiate the ascent, but the submersible wouldn't respond. Panic set in as the Nautilus was pulled deeper into the wreckage, drawn toward the source of the glow. The pressure gauges spiked, and the hull creaked ominously. We were on the verge of being crushed. Just when we thought it was the end, the glow suddenly faded, and the hum ceased. The submersible systems came back online, and we began our ascent. The journey to the surface felt like an eternity, but we finally breached the water and were pulled aboard the Ocean Voyager. We were shaken and exhausted, but we had survived. We recounted our experience to the rest of the crew, but the data we had collected was corrupted, filled with static and interference. The samples we had taken from the crystals were inexplicably gone. The official report listed equipment malfunction and deep-sea pressure as the cause of our ordeal, but we knew better. The Phantom Fleet was not just a collection of sunken ships. It was a graveyard haunted by a malevolent force. The glow, the hum, and the presence we felt were real, and they were a warning to anyone who dared to disturb the resting place of the lost convoy. To this day, I can't explain what we encountered in the depths of the Atlantic. The ocean is vast and full of mysteries, and some are better left undisturbed. If you ever find yourself diving in unexplored waters, remember this tale. Respect the unknown and beware the Phantom Fleet. The sea is a place of wonder and beauty, but it is also home to ancient terrors that defy explanation.